was the official star, and Steve Cochran and Chill Wills were the co-stars in that one. It didn't really, and doesn't stand up to practically anything else that Peckinpah made subsequent. But about a year later, at MGM, a guy by the name of, if I can get his name right here, N.B. Stone Jr., he gets screen credit for the story here. Well, he indeed wrote a script, but the truth of it was that Stone was an alcoholic, and the script was pretty lousy. The basic storyline was there, but the dialogue and some of the advancing moments of the story were poorly done on the basis of not so much Deadly Companions, but a TV show that Peckinpah had created, wrote, and several episodes directed. It's called The Westerner. That starred Brian Keith. That was back in 1959, early 60. Peckinpah did a really good job on that television show. It was very short-lived, but it was really critically acclaimed and well thought of. The executives at MGM in Hollywood took a look at a couple of the episodes and said, this is probably the guy who could resurrect this lousy script that we've had written for us, rewrite it, and we're going to give him the opportunity to direct it. Well, he pretty much changed the script around considerably as far as the dialogue was concerned. The basic tenet of aging men in a changing time stayed and actually became almost synonymous with Peckinpah in subsequent movies. Some of the things that Peckinpah changed within the structure was to have the Joel McCrea character die at the end of the movie. Originally, it was Westrom, the man who was going to be the culprit. In the original script, he was the one that died as a result of the shootout. But Peckinpah felt that there was a quality in making this change of having the corrupt, I'll put that in quotation marks, corrupt part of the duo come forward and say, I'll take care of this. I will see that the gold gets to the bank. And to have the honorable one say, I knew you will be able to do this. Essentially saying that even though there was a little lapse in judgment at one point in their little odyssey, he felt that he could trust his former partner to do the right thing. As far as the film is concerned, it started off that McCrea was going to be Westrom and Randolph Scott was going to be Judd. Before the shooting started, unbeknownst to both actors, either they personally or their agents went to the producer, a guy by the name of Richard Lyons, and said, I don't want to do the part that I've been assigned. I want to do the other guy. And the producer sensed that both men didn't realize that they were unhappy with what they had been selected to do, and came forward and said, you're now doing this one, and you're doing that one. And the guys were tickled with the prospect of having their roles reversed. As far as the distribution of the movie is concerned, a guy by the name of Saul, S-O-L, Saul Siegel, was head of production at MGM. He took a look at Peckinpah's finished product, which was pretty much what Peckinpah had in mind from the outset, and put his blessing on it as far as what he thought was a commendable job of making a film. The movie was shown to people in New York at the parent company of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer called Lowe's Incorporated. And the guy who was the chief in New York hated the movie, despised it. The story goes that at the screening, about 15 minutes into it, he fell asleep and didn't wake up until the gunfight at the end, and sent word to California that Saul Siegel was fired. I would assume it was more than just this movie. In 1962, MGM was probably having difficulty in the movie business. But there was some thought that primarily it was because this had been green-lighted, had been made, and the guy in New York said, this is something that we're not going to really try to distribute. The movie opened up in June of 1962 in New York City as the lower half of a double feature program, top billed by an acquisition that MGM had gotten from Italy called the Thurs, which was originally done mostly in Italian, with the exception of probably the principal players, which were Orson Welles and Victor Mature, in what is essentially a spear and sandal spectacle in color that was shot in Italy. That was the featured movie, and Ride the High Country was a co-feature. So they were really flushing Mr. Peckinpah's movie down the drain by treating it that way. Bosley Crowther, the guy who was a writer for the New York Times for years, couldn't help but comment on the fact that two movies opened up that day, and he dismissed the Tartars with a paragraph saying that it really wasn't very good, that it was a poor excuse for a spectacle movie. But he couldn't say enough good things about the Western that Sam Peckinpah created. And apparently there was no real knowledge of N.B. Stone Jr.'s involvement with it, because Crowther said that he didn't know who either man was, Peckinpah or Stone, but he had to congratulate them on an effort that he thought was really quite well done. Poor Mr. Peckinpah would probably, like Orson Welles and a few other directors that were considered mavericks within the movie business, if he had the foresight to realize what was ahead of him after having struggled with Fitzsimmons on Deadly Companions, and then having his movie not altered, thankfully, but really cast to the four winds by MGM. The next film he would do was Major Dundee at Columbia Pictures with a producer by the name of Jerry Bressler. And that ended up being taken away from him and recut, re-edited. Peckinpah disowned the movie. What's going to be played here on Thursday night is Peckinpah's next film in 1969, Major Dundee in 1964 with Charlton Heston and Richard Harris was not a success, really. And Bressler pretty much put out the edict that Peckinpah was unemployable, or that he shouldn't be employed. And for the next 5 years, for the most part, Peckinpah wasn't employed in the movie business. He did do some television work, and he had a couple of scripts that he had worked on and got credit for. One of the movies was called Viva Villa with Robert Mitchum and Yul Brynner. You'll find Peckinpah's name attached to that. And in '69, he gets involved with the Wild Bunch. And that's probably considered to be Peckinpah's best film, although this is really a good one. As far as McCrae and Scott are concerned, Randolph Scott and McCrae had been in the movie business at this point for almost 30 years and had been star magnitude in the 30s and 40s. In the 50s, there was a little bit of a decline as far as not so much the quality of the movies that they were in, but their popularity as actors in films. Both gravitated towards westerns, and that's primarily what they were in the 1950s, with the culmination of those careers being with this movie. This was actually Randolph Scott's last film, and he decided to retire. He was pleased with the movie. He was pleased with what Peckinpah had created, and he was willing to retire a wealthy man. He had invested wisely in real estate in California and the surrounding area out west, and he was quite wealthy. Joel McCrae announced that he was going to retire with this film. He backtracked a little bit. There was a couple of movies that he appeared in as a favor to his son, a kid by the name of Jody McCrae, who was trying to make a name for himself in the 60s in movies, not very successfully, but McCrae apparently bowed to his son's request to maybe make an appearance in a couple of movies that he was in. So this was not McCrae's last screen appearance. It probably should have been. It would have been a really good way to go out of the business. But what did you think of this?
Oh, it's very good.
The photography is really spectacular.
Yeah.
There's a guy by the name of Lucian Ballard is the cinematographer here, and I understand that Ballard was not the easiest guy to work for. He was very particular as to how the shots were set up, lighting was done, but if there's any judgment as to what he and Peckinpah created visually, is pretty spectacular. Those some of those scenes in the mountains are really quite beautiful,
Yeah.
a beautiful
Yeah.
backdrop for
Yeah.
the story. They started off in a national park shooting this, and they got snowed out. There was a really bad snowstorm that made it virtually impossible to continue to shoot where they were, so they moved back a little closer to Los Angeles. Some of this was shot in there's a famous, it's called the canyon. I'm forgetting the name of the canyon, but it was used in numerous movies. That's where the mining sequence was shot, where there seems to be a rocky area, and where the encampment was, where they were mining. What else? There was something else I was going to tell you. I'm drawing a blank here. But Ballard was the cinematographer. The music score is not bad here. The theme that keeps cropping up. I didn't consider it to be intrusive. It was pleasant. I know what it was. In that sequence, in the mining camp, was supposed to be snow on the ground. Ballard came up with the idea, because there was no snow available, but they wanted it to appear that it was in cold country. Soap suds were what was on the ground. Soap suds. And I guess in certain scenes, if you look carefully, you might notice that instead of being squashed down, the snow tends to fly up a little bit, as soap suds would, being tread upon. Sam Peckinpah. He was not noted for being the easiest guy to work for. He would browbeat his actors sometimes rather nastily, but he developed a little bit of a stock company, and you can see the beginnings of it here. There's L.Q. Jones, there's R.G. Armstrong. Jones played one of the Hammond brothers. Armstrong plays the girl's religiously oriented father. A guy by the name of John Davis Chandler plays one of the other Hammond brothers. He's the first one to die there in
The
that
sort of wild-eyed one.
confrontation in the mountains.
Yeah.
And the last guy really was a popular actor in Peckinpah's movies, Warren Oates. He eventually becomes the star of one of Peckinpah's later and probably not great movies called Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia.
Yeah. Some people really like that movie now.
Some people really do.
I've never seen it. But
Well, I'm not one of the ones that cares for it, even though I would be considered probably a rooter for Sam Peckinpah. But some of those things after, what's the turning point? I don't remember. Maybe it's The Getaway in the early 60s. There's a movie called Convoy, which is pretty suspect, with Borgnine and Chris Christopherson. And then Alfredo Garcia. One of the last things he did was over in Germany that was pretty good. That was a war movie, which right at the moment...
Cross of
Cross of Iron.
Cross of Iron,
Yeah.
with James
that's
Coburn and
interesting,
Max
so.
Manning Shell.
Yeah, I love that film.
Yeah.
That was a decent movie, but a couple of things there that Peckinpah was doing. The Killer Elite, I never could get into that. That was James Caan and Robert Duvall. I didn't think that was so hot. But Peckinpah has a legacy of Ride the High Country and The Wild Bunch, certainly. I always liked the Ballad of Cable Hogue. I thought that was a lyrical film that had a little violence in it, but not much. Definitely a more sweet-natured depiction of what the West was like. But again, it dealt with changing times and men that perhaps had outstayed their welcome in the circumstances they had been prominent in earlier in their life. But I hope you enjoyed this.
Yeah, very
And,
much.
I wish there were more here to watch this, because this is a good one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very good. It's interesting, with many interesting things, and we'll see a lot of parallels with the Wild Bunch, but the way that, he really, the mining camp, it really looks dirty and gritty, and everybody's unshaven, but they really look like they haven't bathed.
Yeah.
And that, you can sort of, Hollywood really hadn't done that before.
Yeah. And the women
like
are
the prostitutes would be.
Mariette Hartley is attractive.
Well, yeah.
But it's not a knock your
But
socks off
yeah, I mean,
beauty.
there's
It's a
a lot
wholesomeness.
of, sort of grotesque types, the Kate, who's very large and,
Yeah.
always saying, have a good time, and laughing.
Yeah, and the drunken judge.
Yeah,
Edgar
the drunken
Buchanan is
judge.
good in it as
Yeah.
the judge. He had a career that was very interesting.
Yeah.
I think he started off, he had been a dentist in real life. And one of the first movies he's in, what does he play? It's a Western, and he plays a dentist. No, there's a lot of good points here with this film. And it's relatively short. 94 minutes is, by at least contemporary standards, that's a short movie.
Yeah. No, it's very good. And that's, and the classic shootout at the end there, facing each other, and that was very well done.
I enjoyed this movie. I don't think I saw it when it first came out. I think I had to see it probably for the first time. It was on television, maybe half dozen or so years after it had been released. I'm pretty sure I saw it before I saw the Wild Bunch. Funny story that I'll impart to you about that. There was a man here last month, Garen Daly. And,
Oh, yeah.
Garen Daly has been in this area and in this business for years, and